Suellio, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here. Just before we came on air, you told me that you love podcasts, so I'm relaxed.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, Tom, for inviting me. It's always great to share the passion. It's not so common to do that in real life, right? You have a bunch of friends that don't know what sim racing is. You have partners who are like, he keeps talking about the sim racing thing. I know nothing about it. And then suddenly you find people that you can share so many things about. So that's lovely.
Yeah, that is actually a really good point. I always say that the podcast for me is an opportunity to just spend an hour in the week not looking at emails, not looking at Notion and Figma and blah 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 blah, and just kind of zoom out a bit and chat to somebody else in the sim racing space. And actually, I hadn't really made the connection that you can't really do that anywhere else because it is a niche, right, or a niche, as people would say in North America. So yeah, you're right. It is nice to find a fellow sim racer to talk to. And actually, there seems to be more and more sim racers. I've noticed, especially in the last year, that you never seem to be more than, one connection away from somebody who sim races now.
No, I think, I think I read somewhere that like Formula One is growing a lot because of Drive to Survive. And I've coached now the first generation of people who got into sim racing because of Drive to Survive directly. Like they saw it on Netflix, they got involved, they started watching, they started getting a bunch of like, the algorithm doing its job.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
did you know there's like gaming things about that? Oh, did you know you can actually buy a wheel? Did you know? Did you know? And then suddenly you have like a person who in 1 year went from knowing nothing about motorsports to then having a $3,000-$4,000 rig and having fun and getting excited and the adrenaline kick in when you join a race, and they're just addicted. So it's growing. I think the way is only up.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because once you're in, there's so much to explore. There's so many avenues to go down. It's like it's interesting, right? And I know we're going deep, right? Straight away. I haven't really properly introduced you yet, and we're just going deep into sim racing. But the interesting thing about sim racing is because it's made up of so many games, and those games are all simulating a type of motorsport, and there's so many types of motorsport. Like some games you'll play and it'll be like an RPG, and especially like strategy games or MMOs, it's like you can choose to be a crafter or a trader or a bandit or a pirate or whatever, and you have freedom to kind of choose your path through the game. Well, sim racing is kind of the same, except you choose your path by choosing which platforms you're going to be on, which racing games you're going to play, which communities you're going to get involved in, which tournaments you want to practice for and watch. So you can craft so many different journeys and still be a sim race. You could have one person who might be like one of the most famous people in oval racing on iRacing, but people in Europe who are focused on GT racing would never have heard of them. But actually, they've got a huge following, a huge community, a whole world of people that love that environment and the setups and the liveries and the broadcasting and the commentators and they share a common vision with the guys in Europe who are maybe doing GT racing and yet don't cross because you can choose all these different paths.
Exactly. I mean, right now with the way the world is nowadays, there are so many big bubbles, like bubbles of thousands of people, millions of people that don't cross over. It's crazy. I mean, it's a good thing. You will find your bubble for sure. Whatever you start, you get into sim racing, you will find what you like, and you will naturally be drawn to the domain that you like, to the team that you like, to the club, to the league that you like, to the game, to the simulator that you like. So there's plenty of options that will match your vision, your dream. What is it that you like? Is it off-road? There's an esport for that? Is it road? There's an esport competition for that? Or is it or there's a club there's a league for people who have started late and are not so fast, but they love to share that passion. They have like there's so many kinds of leagues and clubs that will definitely find your own, and you're gonna find your own way to progress and to have fun.
Okay, my mind is now racing. So firstly, that has triggered a horrible memory very recently being invited to a sim racing league that does a set of courses. It does historic racing, but it's called it was like Old Men and Dads Racing League. And they were chatting about Grid Finder and how they list their community on Grid Finder for drivers to find them. I was like, looks fun. They're like, you should join. I was like, oh, I don't know if I qualify. They're like, how old are you? I was like, 31. I was like, yeah, you qualify. It's 30 and over. And I was like, oh God, it's happening. It's happening. But I really like something you said there. You said about like find your bubble. Now, Liam, podcast producer, marketing manager, Grid Finder, is listening live to this show. Liam, write that down. I love that. Find your bubble, because we have the tagline, find your place on the grid. Maybe that's because it's Grid Finder, right? And it just kind of makes sense. But that's a little bit too niche. And actually, when you zoom out, it's about finding your tribe, right? Finding your way through the sim racing world. But anyway, look, I don't want to I said before this show that the challenge with the 30 to 40 minute like deep dive into a human being is that you can get very easy sidetracked. And I was like, we just won't do that. Okay, we'll keep ourselves on track. And
well, let me apologize in advance because I talk a lot.
Yeah, me too. This is going to be a nightmare. Okay, I need to remember that I'm the host, not the guest. Shut up. So yes, Suellio, you have such an incredible CV in the sim racing world in such a relatively short period of time. I was watching some of your videos about your radical racing at Motec, which looked flipping awesome. I saw some stuff about your Formula 4 racing, which looked flipping awesome. But that's, both of those are real world racing endeavors. But you're also the founder, creator of the motor racing checklist.com, the motor racing book. I actually saw you talking about that live on the stage at the Sim Racing Expo a few weeks ago. And you're a concert pianist. Like, how do you juggle all of this?
It's all connected. It's all connected.
Yeah. Tell us more. I have a theory.
My fiance, she's a concert pianist. She's doing her doctorate right now. That's how we met, actually, because I was doing my bachelor's in piano in Brazil. And she's about to launch an online course called the Practice Checklist. And I swear, we did not have the same idea. We did not talk about it. Like her name, like the name of her course was perfect for that, because out there are so many crossovers, so many things from different sports. You can do, I don't know if you know, like The Inner Game of Tennis is a very famous book about tennis that millions of athletes from all domains have to read. If you're, I don't know, a rugby player, rugby, right? A rugby player.
Rugby is actually an interesting.
It would be very, very
because there is a lot of hugging.
Exactly. So if you're a rugby player, you have to read that book. If you're a racing driver, you have to read that book. If you whatever sport, because it's the inner game of tennis is a book about the inner strategies for performance. Whatever you do, art, painting, sports. And then this is just a tiny example, because when I did my piano career, it's over 15 years. I played with orchestras. I've done piano competitions. I went to bachelor, then master's degree. So I was all in, practicing 8 hours a day, 7 hours a day. And I started finding the best processes for learning, for using your time the best way, not creating bad habits, how to feel your body, how to actually create new muscle memory, and all of that. As soon as I went to sim racing, I was like, oh wait, I can apply so much of it. And a lot of and this is the fun, the interesting bit from this is that if you think of music, you have thousands of years of literature. It's a very old thing. It's been with us forever. Motorsports is only 150 years old, maybe 200 maximum, right? So I might be all over the place right now with the years. But the thing is, motorsports is young. It's just starting. And the literature, the technique literature is also still young. You don't have a lot of people talking about technique in the effective way. It's very easy to talk about theory. It's very easy to talk about the physics involved in a race car. But how can you, as a human being, actually go there and feel it out and develop your technique in the best way possible? There are great schools out there, but it's still rare. It's not like spread out like the music world. So I was consistently bringing that from piano, and I had a whole story with piano having bad habits. I started without a teacher, and I developed so many bad habits that even today, after 15 years of actually having good teachers and trying my best, I still carry some of them, like some glimpses of like some, it's all there. So when I got into sim racing, I was like, okay, this is a hobby, great, but I don't want to develop bad habits. I want to learn the right things, and I want to teach my body the right way, because the body is dumb. It repeats whatever instruction you give to it, right? So if you say, oh, you have to hold your breath while driving, and then you learn this, it's gonna feel right, even if it hurts you, even if it hurts your performance. Your body is dumb; it's just gonna repeat it. So I was all in trying to prevent these things from happening, and I came into sim racing with a whole mindset of efficiency, and that's why I think I was able to develop my skills quite quickly. So over 2 years, I went from beginning to sim racing to being Brazilian, like not champion, but like I was holding Brazilian titles in the best leagues. So I think a lot of the concepts, a lot of the ways I think, 99% comes from piano.
I'd see. I find this fascinating, right? And I think for people who have listened to a few episodes now, over the last year and a bit, we've had over 70 people on this show, and I have noticed a trend that people who have an affinity with sim racing also seem to have an affinity with music, and that's either because they play guitar or they play another kind of instrument or they DJ. I've noticed so many, like, so Gamer Muscle, Chris Hay, Steve Worrell, like the three people. One of those guys is a kind of tech entrepreneur in sim racing, and two are creators. One's very much a streamer. One's somebody who's doing YouTube on demand content about sim racing and setups and stuff. But they all seem to have this affinity with music, and I've tried to work out what it is, because is it to do with rhythm? Is it to do with the discipline you need in order to get good at it? There's something about
You're talking
both.
about like being a musician, right? Actually playing
or
something.
Just being musical. Yeah, so DJing or playing an instrument. There seems to be a link between very musical people and sim racers.
I think we like to be active. Like, like when you're a kid, it's been told that if you leave your kid watching TV all day as they grow up, they become a very passive person. They don't want to do stuff. Their brain is like, they're just receiving. There's only the vectors information in, but you don't actually interact with it. And the other end of the spectrum is a kid who's always playing with toys, with video games, with stuff. They're active. They want to do something. They want to be part of it. So I think playing music and driving a race car is similar in this how can I say that, in the fact that you're consistently in charge.
Yeah,
you're responsible.
That's very interesting.
And I think that's not necessarily for music. It's anything that requires constant attention, responsibility. Like I grew up playing video games like a madman, like a mad kid. So basically, I was so addicted to MMORPGs back then. Well, that's how I learned English. I would wake up at 4 a.m. to grind, to farm in my games before I would go to school at 6. And would come back from school, have lunch, and then back to the game. And in the game, I was playing Lineage 2. It was a very old MMORPG. I had a clan with 200 people, and I was like 14. And I was like leading these people. I was creating strategies. I was organizing. I was developing social skills. I was developing notions of responsibility, of consequences, of, dealing with all that. So while being so young, I was getting ready, almost like developing entrepreneurship.
100%.
Because I was playing MMOs, and like no one sees that. Like my parents were like, "Oh, you're gonna get addicted. This is bad for you. It's bad for your eyes. It's bad for whatever." And in the meantime, my brother was like watching TV or doing something, and like, and they were like, "Oh no, he's doing something better because he's not playing video games," But like, it's very difficult, like to when you're growing up, to know exactly what kind of activities you're doing are going to develop your traits, your skills for the future. And for me, I think the simplest way to divide this is being an active person or not being an active person.
I think it's interesting. It's funny because me and my co-founder Nicole at GridFinder, we've been talking about this the last couple of weirdly mornings. I seem to get up and we'll start messaging at like 7 o'clock in the morning, and just with like ideas that we wake up with, which is, I don't know, maybe weird, maybe not. And we were talking this morning about like creation and what creation is, and whether there's something about what we're doing in entrepreneurship, there's something about creation that appeals to us. Now, it strikes me that you are a creator, right? And I don't mean that in the kind of throwaway content creator sense. Like, I'm not saying you obviously are a content creator, but it's deeper than that. It feels like ever since you were a kid, you're not satisfied by just, okay, sim racing is great, I'm going to turn up and I'm going to get good at sim racing. Like, that in itself, a lot of people would be very happy with that. Get good at sim racing and race as part of a group. That's fine. And that's totally, okay. But it feels to me like whenever you're doing anything, whether it's, music, MMORPGs, or sim racing, it's what can I build in this space? How can I lead this group? And gaming, the globalization of gaming has essentially been the perfect breeding ground for that approach in your life.
Yes, and it's just like, like there's always that person in the family when you go to a trip that wakes up everyone in the morning and says, "Oh, we gotta enjoy the trip. Let's do something. Let's get out. Let's la." So that's my sister. Like she was basically waking up everyone super early when we were traveling to do stuff because she didn't want to miss it. I didn't have that kind of leadership in that environment. I was a very lazy person. I just wanted to sleep a little bit more. But I kind of have that trait in other ends. And so I have this trait in content creation. I have this trait while coaching. Like, oh, hey, let me help you, like, really not lose time. Like, you're spending 2 hours of your life here. How can we make the best out of it? How can you have the most fun out of it? How can it be, like, not frustrated and so on? So I'm like, I know exactly how to guide people in sim racing, in content creation, like my sister would guide the family in trips. So I think I brought a bit of that in different domains, but you nailed it. I think it's a matter of like feeling that you are responsible for improving the experience for others, especially newcomers right now, because now there's this responsibility. Like, there's a lot of people who say, I literally started sim racing because of your channel.
Yeah.
And it's a huge responsibility. Like, I'm changing lives right now, even if it's a small thing, right? But like, there's people who have told me, like, oh, like, kind of like I was bored. I didn't know what to do with life. And now I have a team. I prepare for endurance events and heart rate goes up the roof. So like, people are really having a lot of fun. And in a way, I presented it to them and it feels great to do it.
That's so interesting, the sense of responsibility that you get inherently by creating. You create something, whether that's a course, whether that's your book, whether it's the checklist. Like, you, by creating, there's a sense of responsibility to make sure that is the best for that person. And is it responsibility on a personal basis, or is it responsibility for like the space that you're in, i.e. sim racing, or responsibility for the business to do well so you can pay your bills? Or is it an overwhelming sense of responsibility to that individual that, okay, they found sim racing through me, so I need to make sure that this journey that they go on, they get set off on the right foot?
I think it's a social responsibility. It's more like, humans are not one body. Humans are one big conglomerate of brains, and that's what we built. Like, we would not work alone. Like, we need each other, right? So in a way, it's like in brain we have neurons. In the world we have people. It's like the same thing. We create connections and we improve each other. So I think it's a social responsibility. I get from the society. I have clean water. I have like science. I have laser surgery and medicine, and I give back by, hey, entertainment, like, hey, enjoy your life better, hey, drive better, have more fun. So it's a very tiny contribution that I'm giving back to society. And what I get as one person is a huge world to live in, and with so many amazing things. So it's a social responsibility to give back.
I love that. And something you said earlier, you said, I learned entrepreneurship when you were playing the MMORPG, right? Has business, and I'm kind of saying business rather than entrepreneurship, has business always been something that you've been interested in and motivated by when you're creating the checklist or creating the book, or whatever it is, creating your reach, your following? Is it the idea of building a business that's exciting, or is it the more foundational concept of entrepreneurship where it's just creating something? Like, how have you found that transition from, okay, I'm giving back, I have this social responsibility, to, okay, I now need to make sure that I'm studying business principles and marketing principles, and that we're being efficient, and that we've got our funnel set up correctly? Like, how have you found that process and that transition?
It was never a plan. I started coaching in 2019 with the sole intention of making money for my tuition when I got admitted to my master's degree in piano. And as soon as I finished my first session, I was like, oh, that's easy. I'm good. And then I did the second one, third, fourth, and then all the way to, I think currently we are at 2,050 sessions. It was an ongoing process of realizing that could be a thing, instead of, oh, I made money for the piano thing, I'm going to continue with the piano. Of course, yeah, okay, so it was never intended. And then COVID hit. So I could not go out to play piano. I could not go out to have piano lessons. And sim racing is exploding, because sim racing in essence is virtual. So in a way, that pulled me towards investing even more time in it. And as I was improving, as I was realizing that I was having, at some point I just realized I was doing 30 sessions a week. I was like, I realized that could be a business months after it was already a successful business.
That's
and
very
after
challenging.
I realized that, I was like, okay, I have to actually realize, okay, I'm getting into a point right now where I'm limited by the amount of time that I'm investing. Like, it's taking all my time. I'm making a lot of money, but now money is not the problem anymore. Okay, I can already pay my rent. I can already enjoy life and just have fun. Cool. How can I make this even better? How can I have a bigger impact? So let's try to learn, how can we scale things? How can I impact more people? So I went from Twitch to YouTube, because Twitch is not that scalable. YouTube is more scalable. You can go viral. You can get millions of views if the video does well. On Twitch, you have to be live, so you kind of get stuck a little bit. So I did that transition from Twitch to YouTube, and then from Twitch to Instagram, and then from one-on-one sessions only to creating a course that would be available on demand. So then if it goes viral and 1,000 people buys it, I don't have to work 1,000 hours more. So I was realizing that as the problems of time constraints were starting to show up. And then I had to study marketing, study business, study productivity, and improve my own health, work out, eat better, sleep better, in order to solve these problems. So I studied business as I had business issues.
And what did you study?
Okay, so a lot. I studied psychology, some psychology books, I can cite some names. So Robert Cialdini, there's a big Bible about psychology called Influence, how to become a more likable person, how to understand others' minds, how to have a nice conversation, how to negotiate in business, how to have better marketing, how to treat your partners and your family better. So it's a manual on social interaction. And because I was having so much social interaction right now, because I was going viral and everything, then I had to really nail this part. And then I started doing more negotiation books. I think Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. And then I started reading marketing books, Alex Hormozy, I went for 100 million offers. I'm about to start 100 million leads. Then I read a bunch of, I think it's Scott Adams. So it's really a lot of books about marketing and psychology. Pretty much, I think that's the essence of it. Because I was already I did read a lot of sim racing technique as well, because I was developing my own thing. I was like, okay, I have to do a field research to understand what's available out there. And then I realized there were so many gaps. So I started the more I read, the more I understood what I really needed to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think business-wise, it was pretty much marketing and psychology.
That's really interesting, because essentially, especially in the early days, the product is you. So it sounds like you made a very conscious decision to, right, if I'm going to improve the product, that means I need to improve me. And there's a holistic approach to that. That doesn't necessarily mean I have to study to be a better coach. Like, that's fine. I can study to be a better coach and I could charge more for my coaching sessions, but that's not the scalable bit, because there is a cap on the price of an hour one-to-one. So how do you replicate yourself 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 times over? That's fascinating. Now, you said during your first coaching session, at the end of that session, you thought, I'm good at this. How did you know? Like, what is it, in your opinion, that makes a good coach? And how did you just arrive there on your first session?
That's a very good question. I don't want to brag, but most coaches, like 99.9% of the coaches, tell you when to break, when to turn, what to do. I never do that. I try not to do it. I try not to answer. A student asks me, should I do second or third here? And I say, I don't know. What are the factors that we are going to reflect on to come to this decision? Let's think. On second gear, you get more engine braking. On third gear, you have lower torque. Differential acts a little bit less. And then I start making the student figure out the answer in that corner specifically, because then they can replicate that autonomously in other corners. If I tell you, I brake at 150, great. But like, what? Are you creating a dumb person because you're just giving instructions? No, you have to create autonomy. And as a coach, I realized that very early. I was like, what if I just tell him to brake here in this place and to use this gear? He's not going to know how to do that in a different corner. How can I create a thought process in the student's head that is replicable to other situations? So I did that. That's from piano. That's from piano. Like in piano, the teacher would never tell me what finger to use on that note. It was like, why would you use this finger? Because it creates this motion and blah, 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 and it helps before, it helps after. So I cannot accept like just telling the student what to do. I think that sucks. I prefer to spend more time developing a skill of autonomy. And then in my first session, I realized that the student was only asking things like what to do. I said, like, if you want to know what to do, just watch a guide. Like, I want a YouTube video, right? Yeah, exactly. It's all there. What I want to do is, how can you become the benchmark? How can you be the guy who tells where to brake to your teammates? And that's what I did initially. It was like, okay, let's try to figure out the factors that actually matter that will develop your skills. And then from there, I realized that the student was like, well, I actually had coaching with this guy. They never did that. They just told me where to brake. And I was always slower after in a new track, in a new car. But with you taught me things that I was able to apply in a different game, in a different simulator, in a different car, in a different track. And as soon as he told me that, I was like, this is the way to go. And then I never stopped. So it was pretty much from the first session, I was already thinking about how can I create ways to teach that are going to be replicable.
There's a theory that the difference between coaching and mentoring is that to be a mentor, you have to essentially apply your past to somebody else's present, right? So let's take for myself, for example, I have a business mentor, somebody who's been in business 30 years, super successful, several companies and exits, done very well. So I'm kind of living his past, right? So that's a mentor, somebody who can give you very targeted advice, almost instructional at times. Whereas a good coach, in theory, never has to have done the discipline, the skill, the sport, the business themselves. So the best football coach in the world doesn't necessarily have to have ever played football themselves. Coaching is a method, not an instruction.
Yep.
How, on a sliding scale of coaching to mentoring, where do you think you sit?
It depends on the student. So I can do all four. It's four. It's
Okay.
teaching, instructing, coaching, mentoring. Teaching is literally injecting new information. Instructing is telling what to do. Coaching is reflecting on what they are already doing. And mentoring is a more deep,
Holistic.
Yeah, holistic thing. So it depends on your level. If you're just starting, then I will teach you stuff. I will take the time to, well, first of all, I will probably reject the session and say, okay, go through my course first, get the basics, and then we do a session, because then you're just going to like waste your money in stuff that is available out there. I try to always accept the ones that will really benefit, that they really need me at that point. Like the people who have finished the course and are still a little bit like, okay, I understand everything, but I don't know exactly what to apply first. Okay, then let's do a session, and I'm going to pinpoint what bits you should reflect on. So it really depends so much. Like my coaching session depends. It varies so much, because I teach kids who are 7-year-old, 8-year-old, like who barely speak. This is like I had a session with a kid. He was 8 years old and he only spoke one word all session. It was okay, 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 and it was pretty much that. And he was a genius. Now he drives for Coanda. So like you can imagine. I think we've been working together for 4 years. His name is Xander Reed, and I mean that's a totally different teaching style. As I was actually having to create. Oh no, but if you turn too much, the front tires are gonna cry. They're not gonna like it. Try to like personify the physics to make it more understandable. And then you go all the way to a student who's like 71-year-old, who has like a Air Force former, like, like legend. And that's a totally different way to explain things. He already knows the physics. He already has all the knowledge. Then like it's a totally different way of teaching. So I really adapt depending on what you need and what is your background.
How much do you learn when you're coaching?
So much. I think I became a much better driver after I started coaching, because I had to understand the thing in order to explain it. Like I needed to know what I was doing. Sometimes I was like, okay, I don't really know here. Let me drive. And then I would drive and I would like think, what am I doing here that is kind of unconscious, subconscious? And then I would bring that up to consciousness so I could digest it and then explain it. So in this process, I was able to pinpoint all my driving traits and all the concepts and all the possibilities and all the driving styles. And I started like writing down. So during all these 2050 sessions that I've done so far, I have a notepad open always. And then whenever something that I'm explaining is new, that I never explained it to anyone, I write it down. And I have a full database of things that I've explained that worked, that didn't work, that work well. If you're in this level, that work well. If you're driving this kind of car, if this car is oversteer, you have to think like this. So I started creating like I created like such a huge database that's when I decided to create the motor racing checklist. It's like I got everything that matters and put in one product. So, and then in this process of developing all these things, I started noticing my own things, my own bad habits, my own solutions that worked on a top level, on a 0.1% esports level, after I was teaching someone who was a beginner on how to solve. So it made me a much, much, much better driver.
It's incredible, isn't it? It's so in a past life, I used to teach people how to navigate warships. So I'd gone through and I'd done it for a few years myself, and I was captain of a ship, and then I went to the Naval Academy to teach. And I noticed that just the process of teaching people how to do stuff, it seems to embed the knowledge even deeper within yourself. And I can't quite explain it, but once you teach something or you coach something, your understanding of it just by going through the process of teaching and coaching it seems to be subconsciously reinforced, because you're having to, right, how do I explain this to somebody who doesn't know? And then you start to kind of reveal the unknown unknowns of the subconscious, like you were saying there. Like, what am I subconsciously doing? Like, you have to go through that process. And then I started, when I was teaching, I would start getting the students, even after a couple of weeks of the course, to teach each other something. So that you split up their syllabuses a little bit, so they were doing different things at different times. And then, okay, right, now teach that to them, teach that to them. And it's such a powerful way of progressing your own craft and developing a much deeper knowledge of what you're doing. And I wonder, I mean, let me throw this to you. Would you, if an aspiring esports driver is listening, and it blew me away when I went to the Red Bull factory that some of them do listen to this podcast, would you recommend coaching as a training activity for those who want to get in that 0.1?
Yes. It's when you try to teach something, you have to think about it, and therefore you're doing an unintended visualization practice of it. There's people who actually do that. There's athletes. I think it's Michael Phelps. He was the legend of visualization practice. Like he would literally use the words "play the tape" in his head. He was practicing his swimming moves in his head. And whenever you're trying to explain what you do to someone else, you're practicing, because you are doing this practice in order to communicate it to someone else. So it does help. It does help for sure. It helps you become a more adjustable driver. The more you can describe what you do, the more you can change it. If you can't, if it's all by heart, by feeling, and there's a lot of people who like to glamorize doing things by feeling. Oh no, it's just the way I do. Instinct. It's my driving style, and then they become like protective of their own driving style. I think that can hurt you actually, because then it solidifies what you do, and in case you have some tiny bad habits, you're never going to change them. So the more you describe, the more you can adjust.
100%. I guess people who say that they're doing it on instinct, by instinct, they essentially mean they have behaviors that they can't explain and they can't understand, and therefore they can't progress, analyze, evaluate, remove, or add to, right?
Yeah, exactly. Putting words to things is very good. That's how you work.
So this conversation has not gone how I expected it to go at all. This is absolutely fascinating, and I want to dive into this for ages, right? And as I always do, I have like a list of different topics, and I feel like we've barely scratched the surface, right? So I'm going to do something that I've never done before, but I'm kind of excited to see how you react, right? I'm going to list a couple of the talking points that I wanted to cover here, and we've only really got time for one more large topic, right? So I'm going to let you choose, right? So Formula 4, how the hell that happened, the Radical, and your season for next year, and especially your experience of speed and how it changed your thinking in the car. Why write a book? Those were the three things that I had left to cover, and I don't think we can cover all three. I think we might have a part 2 to this, maybe next year.
I'm down
so I'm
to
going to throw that
two.
over to you.
Yeah. Okay. So the Formula 4 thing, it was a very long process. So basically, I had a student in 2019 when I was starting. He was one of my first 10 students.
The before times.
Yeah, exactly. And then he disappeared. I disappeared. He started living his life. I started living my life. Then 3 years later, I decided to start a YouTube channel in January of 2020. Yeah, January this year, 2023. I had 2,000 subscribers then. But then that's when I decided to move from Twitch to YouTube. And I had already a year of experience in algorithm, and I started like studying how to really get better in making things go viral. So I'm literally studying like a madman. And then my YouTube exploded, and he saw that it was exploding. And by this time, like 3 years later, he had joined a Formula 4 team in Miami. So he was like, well, I know him. I know that he can drive. He's a good driver. And we're looking for someone to do a collaboration for exposure. So it was that like they just sent me a message, hey, do you want to drive a Formula 4 in real life? I was like, what? I remember what I was wearing, what I was eating in breakfast in a Sunday morning when I got that message.
What were you
crazy.
eating?
Oatmeal with soy chocolate milk and eggs.
Body is your temple, right?
And I was watching The Big Bang Theory with my girlfriend.
Oh, nice, nice.
And I just started. I ran to the PC and like, okay, let's schedule a call and everything. And then I was so suspicious of it because I would never expect like it has to be a scam.
Yeah.
And then no, it actually happened, and I actually went there and drove a Formula 4 in real life for the first time. And it was I'm a very cautious, progressive driver. I know all the mistakes that you can do, and I think. And it goes back to that coaching thing, right? So I know all the mistakes that you can do that can make you spin and crash. And a lot of that is from my own experience driving, but a lot of that is also from seeing the mistakes at a more quintessential beginner level. Because when you're a pro esports driver, you're making some smaller mistakes, but you're always so close to the limit that you don't really notice the essence of the mistakes. But when you're a beginner, it screams at you what is the root source of the mistake. So I brought those concepts to I made them as clear as possible, and then I was able to apply that while driving the Formula 4 in real life. I was like, okay, I know that if I lock the rear a little bit here, I'm gonna spin right away, or I know if I turn in too slowly initially and don't get the car to point, then I'm gonna have to compensate that later and turn more mid corner at high speed, and then I'm gonna spin and so on. So I was playing all these like doom scenarios in my head and prevented them, and that's why I was so cautious. I was like very progressive, and in the end, it worked out so well. We made a video and it went viral, almost 400,000 views right now on YouTube, which for a long format video is viral.
Yeah.
And then since then, the exposure for the team was so good that they invited me to race again, and then again, and then again. So I did like 4 race weekends for free because they were getting so much exposure and my videos were getting better and better. I hired an editor and I was like, all in, this is my value. Like if any team wants exposure, they just can like give me a ride. I'm gonna spend a month editing a banger Netflix style video, and that's gonna go viral. So that's why what I started focusing on this year, and I got a win in real life. So that was amazing. And then from there, I got a radical invitation to test. I still had to pay, but it was a much very discounted price for that. So I was able to pay using the course's money. And again, the video from the radicals I posted like 3 weeks ago, and it's almost 100K views. So it's also going viral. So I'm thinking, okay, that's the business for me. It's like I am the character of a story, and I have to portray it in the best way possible. And then, I mean, the amount of money that you would have to spend in actual like paid boosts or Facebook ads or stuff to get the amount of exposure that you get by putting me in a car and letting me do the job is crazy. Like you would have to spend $300,000 to get the amount of exposure that you're getting in my channel. And it costs like a fraction of that to put me in a car. I mean, depending on the car. But
and the great thing is you get to go do some driving, right? Now, the driving is so. Whenever I see sim racers go and do real world driving, I'm always torn, right, between two theories. One is this is great for your personal brand, right? This gives you this element of almost like integrity within the sport. You have something to point at to say, look, it validates your courses, right? Look what I'm doing at this higher level of the sport. The other take on it is, okay, it's another sim racing that we've now lost to motorsport. The focus will shift away from sim racing to the real world of motorsport, but they're never going to be an F1 driver. So I'm now a viewer to fund somebody's racing, which, by the way, is a very cynical take. Like, how do you balance putting out real motorsport content with those who have followed your personal brand because of its affinity to sim racing?
I will never get away from sim racing. There are some. I mean, well, I'm saying that, but if someone invites me to Formula One, I will have to. Sorry, but like I'm driving a lot in real life. I think in 2023, I went to 6 or 7 race weekends, maybe 8. That's a lot. I mean, for me, as a sim racer who went to real life, and still, that's 8 times you travel for 4 days. You have enough time to do the other stuff. The only reason I'm not doing a lot of sim racing right now, I mean, sim racing driving, is that I'm doing a lot of sim racing content for coaching. I'm creating, like I said, 5 hours of content on my new online course. That's so much sim racing content. So it's still there. It's alive. I'm making more and more content on YouTube. I'm creating. It's kind of difficult to choose exactly what you're gonna put. Like you have no choice. You have to follow the algorithm, the way it works. If I want to create a very advanced course and make it into a YouTube video, it most likely will not go viral because a lot of people will get bored. It's like you have to understand exactly what kind of content to put out. But I am still doing a lot of sim racing. I actually just did a kind of a national league in Canada yesterday in a radical, and it was the most beautiful race finish ever in iRacing. And I recorded all it. I'm gonna make a YouTube video about it. So I don't think my job. I think my essence is in the bridge. Like I have a bunch of students who come from real life to sim racing. They build a rig because they want to practice to get better in real life. I got a bunch of students who started in real life in sim racing, and then decided to move to a track day in real life. Then they got hooked, and they were like, "No, now I'm joining an actual league. I'm doing like Lucky Dog or like events, grassroots level racing in real life." I have students who went from sim racing to actually racing prototypes in real life. So I'm in the bridge. I'm right here. I'm always in the bridge. I don't see myself. It would be sad to see myself moving only to motorsports and kind of abandoning sim racing, because that's how I built my own story. That's how I built my own technique. And I think I'm responsible. I have a social responsibility of being the bridge and bringing people from there. Hey, like you were just like me. You had a G29 in a desk, and I'm pulling you to maybe someday driving in real life. That's my mission.
I love that. Beautifully said. Now, when we told our listeners that you were coming on the show, understandably, we got a lot of questions. So if you're listening and you submit a question, thank you very much. We've chosen 2 of them to keep it short. We're trying to keep this to 30, 40 minutes. I think I've already failed, right? But I have absolutely no regrets. This has been fantastic, right? So if you want to submit questions to our future guests, just make sure that you're in our Discord, watching on Facebook and Instagram, etc. We post as soon as the guest is confirmed and ask for your questions. So 2 questions that we picked for you. The first one is from Fabrizio Rinaldi on X, Twitter. He says, I think you're pushing sim racing learning forward with concepts like MRP. What's next? Any plans on how you'll advance sim racing even more?
I think it's a constant refinement of ideas. And sometimes when I refine them enough, I find a wall and I have to break that wall with a name. So the MRP was that. Like, what is end of braking? What is apex? Like, sometimes you coast because the car is already rotating a lot and you have to wait. So your end of braking is in a different place, but then how are you going to teach when like sometimes you have 3 different things. You have like the apex, you have the end of braking, and you have the place you accelerate. That's too confusing. Why don't you place a name for the minimum speed that will actually like structure the corner in a better way? So the MRP was my ultimate solution to that. And I think honestly, the MRP is my baby. It's like the concept that when I did that, I was like, wow. Okay, so MRP stands for maximum rotation point, which is basically the place where you reach the minimum speed, the peak rotation, the peak steering, and you start accelerating. In some cars, that maximum rotation point happens after you already released the brakes for a while because you're coasting for a while. In other cars, that means still heavy braking until that point, and then you connect that tail of the brake trace into the throttle. So, but all cars will have 1 point because it's physics. Your speed goes down, you can rotate more. When you start accelerating, you should expect less rotation. So there's a lot of people who say, oh, I rotate my car on power. That's wrong. Because if you're gaining speed and rotation at the same time, you were either under the limit before in order for the car to handle that, or you're going over the limit and you're losing the car on exit. So the MRP solves a lot of problems. Like the lesson on MRP that I'm creating for the 2.0 course right now, the Motor Racing Checklist 2.0, is huge. It's 40 minutes because it's not only the concept, it's the build up of the concept. What were the problems that led to the creation of that name? And then what does it imply? It implies that your speed should be going down, that you spiral down into the middle of the corner. So your line is not a full circle. It's always an ellipse or spiraling down on braking and then spiraling up on power. And then how are you going to shape that depending on the downforce? Is it a V shape or U shaped? There's so many implications of just trying to divide the corner in two without having to divide it physically and the apex, but in car wise. So you can drive the line, right? You can trace a line, the ideal line on a corner, or you can trace the ideal line that the car is able to do. And depending on the car, that line is going to be drastically different. So, like I said, like I don't remember when. It was funny. Okay, I actually remember. So when I was recording the Motor Racing Checklist 1.0 a year and a half ago, during the session, the name of the lesson was True Racing Arc. My point was to say that the racing arc is not a circle, but it's an ellipse. And then during that recording, no scripted, nothing, I was just recording on the camera, I said, the maximum rotation point. And then I was like, oh, that's the name of it. That's the name of it. Boom. And then I started like checking. I was reading Ross Bentley. I was reading Carol Smith. I think there's a guy, his name is, it's not, I forgot his name, but there's an article of a guy like on the internet. There's a bunch of articles out there that I was trying to read to see if I found something similar. No, there was not. Like people did not talk about that. I was like, but this is so important. And then I started working on this concept with high-level drivers who were competing the Porsche Esports Super Cup in iRacing, drivers who were 9K rating, who were like, and then I started talking about this and it actually helped them. And I was like, whoa. And then real life Euro Formula champion took my course and he was like, dude, this maximum rotation point is genius. I was like, what? Like, and then after that, I was like, okay, let's build it. Let's make it a legendary concept. And that is right now the gem of my courses. So if you take the course, you're going to see a lot of stuff that you already know, but it's explained in a better way. But the actual gem are the lessons around the maximum rotation point.
Do you know what I find fascinating is that you haven't taken the current learnings, understandings, methodology of racing and gone, okay, how can I teach people how to do this? Or how can I coach people to adhere to this doctrine? You're essentially, as you're coaching, you're subconsciously coaching yourself. And because your coaching method is so intrinsically about understanding, not muscle memory and doing, not, do as I say, it's about understanding the why. You're coaching yourself to break through current doctrine, to use that word, to create new methods of getting faster, which is fascinating because you're essentially practicing what you preach.
And that is why I wrote a book.
And that is why I was like,
this is my contribution. Like, there's not a lot of literature out there. How can I document this? How can I leave a legacy? Like, when I'm dead, my book is still going to be there. The maximum rotation point, people are going to talk about it. And I'm feeling so proud when I see people talking about the maximum rotation point. Like,
well, I'm glad that
with
question
each other.
came in then. I'm glad that question came in. Fabrizio Rinaldi, that was an absolute banger.
Thank you, Fabrizio.
Question. Thank you. So, next and final question, and this is from, this is not going to roll off the tongue, from DLRDP1SC. I'm sure there's a story behind that. I don't know what it is. In our in the Grid Finder Discord, we've gone from strategy here. We're going right into the weeds, going into the tactics here. How do tire temperatures and tire wear work in iRacing, and what's the best way to get tires in a good working window early into a race/quali session? Totally different question, and I love it.
Okay, that's a very good question as well, because that is the question that separates 6K drivers to 8K drivers to 10K drivers. It's all about managing your temperatures. I have a full lesson about that. Now I'm already pretty much advertising my own online course here, but I do have a full 25-minute lesson about that. And I divide the tire temperatures into 3 ranges, 3 windows. One is short term, which is what happens to the surface of the tire during one corner from entry to late exit. And then what happens in a sector. So if you have 3 corners in a row, then the tire surface temperatures are going to be carried over. And what happens in a full stint. So what you do over the bigger picture in a 2-hour stint, how it can affect, and it's huge. So the short term basically is, if you scrub, you generate temperature. In iRacing, more surface temperature means less grip. So the best way I found to explain this was to a kid when I was doing a coaching session. And I said, imagine that these tires have health bars. And as you start turning into the corner, you consume that energy. You consume the health of the tire. And then the less health you have, the less grip you have. But the problem is, if you turn a little bit too much, say you start understeering a little bit on corner entry, right? Before the apex. By the time you get deeper into the corner, closer to the apex, you already have less health bar, right? Because you have more surface temperature. And you're going to have less grip. But because you have less grip on that tire, say front tires, you want to turn more. So you scrub them even more, you consume even more health, and you overheat them even more, and you have even less grip. So it's very, 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 very easy to get into a snowball effect, where you have less grip, you understeer even more, and then by the time you exit the corner, your tires are done. And if you have another corner right after, you already come into that corner with the front tires overheated, and you're probably going to understeer again. Now, how can I use that? Well, first of all, you don't want to overheat the tire. So please do not use ABS. If you're driving a GT3 car, you do not want to see the lights on the dash. You want to be right under that ABS. The car is going to stop a tiny bit less, but the actual cornering grip that you get when you start turning is going to compensate that. You're going to have a better exit. You're going to take care of your tires. It's going to last more. You're literally going to be faster in that corner, and you're going to save your tires for the longer stint. I was coaching Alberto Nasca. He's a YouTuber, very famous one in Italy. I think his Italian channel has like 1 million subscribers. He drives in real life. He's a professional real life driver. He just drove a GT3 car, and we were doing a session in iRacing. He did 3 laps, and his front tires were 91% tire wear left. It's a 91% tire wear. Then I realized that he was using a little bit too much ABS and doing all this that I described. Like, he was just understeering a little bit too much, and then it was snowballing into even less grip mid-corner, so he was turning more and blah, blah, blah. Then we tried to solve it. Okay, let's use a little bit more engine braking. Let's try to do this. Let's try to do this line. It was a full hour of micro changes to help him get more rotation with using less steering. And then 3 laps later, he had 93% left instead of 91%. So that's a 2% tire wear difference in a faster lap time in 3 laps. Now imagine if you're doing a freaking 2-hour stint, 2% in 2 laps, in 3 laps. That's like, we're talking about 15% tire wear difference. We're talking about going faster and still going exponentially faster by the end of the stint because you have more tires left. So that, and you see, I only talked about the short-term temperature, but it does snowball into the midterm. So if you have compound corners, just by taking care of the tires on the first one, it already helps the grip on the second and third corners. And over a full stint, it's going to make a magical difference, and people are going to think you're cheating or something. So this is all about tire surface temperature. I didn't even talk about carcass temperature.
I think you need to leave something for the checklist, right?
Well, no. Oh, there's so much more, man. I would not be able to explain it here. I literally spending 12 hours a day for the last 2 months to try to make the most complete course possible. So I don't even try to hold any secrets, because if you want more, like I'm not capable of explaining it here. So that's why I'm giving it away, because there's more there. It's a lot more there.
I love it. I love it. Suellio, thank you so much for your time. I have absolutely loved recording this podcast. Every minute of it. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much for giving us the time. And good luck with the launch of the course, and congratulations on the new book, and enjoy the radical season next year. I mean, there's so much exciting stuff to look forward to.
It's just starting, man. I'm gonna continue working to delivering the best possible, the best experience for the viewer, the best experience for me as a driver living these chapters. I went to watch the Gran Turismo movie recently. I was like, oh man, I'm living this, and it's so exciting. So it's all in to give the best content possible for you guys. Thank you so much.
Love it. Thanks, Suellio.